What's going on, everybody? It's that time again. It's the Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 66, on this Thursday, March 14th, 2024. Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy with you on a Thursday. Didn't get to do this show last week, so we're 2 weeks in the making. We've got a lot to catch up on. It's a Thursday. That means it's a recruiting-heavy show with our guy CK here. Future Freaks weekend over the weekend in Norman. Going to recap that, break that down a little bit. Some huge Under Armour camps last weekend and coming up this weekend. Collin was in Dallas. He'll be in Houston this coming weekend. So we'll obviously talk about that a little bit as well. And we'll wrap up the basketball season going into Selection Sunday after the Sooners went one and done in Kansas City yesterday, losing to TCU. But CK, I think we have to start. This wasn't the plan middle of the day yesterday, but we figured let's go ahead and throw it up at the top and go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off first. Jaden Nickens decommitted yesterday. So most fans saw this, obviously, yesterday evening. 2025 four-star receiver, played last season at Millwood, transferred over to Douglas during the basketball season, just got finished winning a basketball state title here in Oklahoma with Douglas, last week. Announced yesterday that he was going to reopen his commitment, decommitting from Oklahoma, and that he's pursuing an opportunity to possibly play both sports, Oklahoma, or the football and basketball. So, Collin, I guess, put fans at ease, or however you want to. What happened here in from what you've gathered, and just kind of what went into from what you can tell, Nickens deciding to reopen his commitment and his recruitment and look for maybe another option.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma fans should take a little bit of ease in the fact that this really wasn't something that caught anybody off guard. Now, I want to make this clear. It wasn't certain. This still is a move that wasn't fully expected. But this also wasn't a surprise because this had been something that folks had been monitoring behind the scenes. I would probably say now for maybe a couple of months, not an extensive amount of time, but this essentially had been a storyline behind the scenes that people were monitoring. And it was more a matter of if and when this happens, what's that going to look like for both parties? So why do I bring that up? The plans have been in place for both Jaden Nickens and Oklahoma now for a little while. Jaden, obviously, like you mentioned, he wants to pursue opportunities to play both football and basketball at the next level. I don't know where that is. I just don't. But I wish him all the best, and I hope that he gets to realize his dream of playing both college football and college basketball. It's incredibly difficult. We know that it's much harder to do than, say, the football to baseball overlap because of, as we know, the seasons being a little bit more distanced. Basketball, football, there's overlap. And so for Jaden Nickens and any athlete across the country who wants to play on the hardwood and the gridiron at the same time while taking college classes and handling your nutrition and rehab and tutoring, there's a lot that goes into that process. It's hard, but maybe Jaden Nickens can pull it off. Again, that's going to be up to him and a lot of other college staffs on both sports fronts to identify a plan there. But, I mean, hey, we've even seen guys like Keon Coleman kind of live in that space. There are other examples at the wide receiver position specifically where that's at least an idea that gets floated. And so we'll see what happens for Jaden Nickens, but for Oklahoma, again, I don't think that the staff was caught off guard by this at all. I think that a pivot plan has essentially been in place, and I think that you've kind of seen the groundwork be laid here, Josh, because we've talked a lot of receivers lately as it relates to Oklahoma in that last spot. Well, now they have two, and some of the names that have been floated around it, Cooper Perry, the four-star wide receiver out of the state of Arizona, couple of Oregon crystal ball picks in, but Oklahoma is not giving up anytime soon, really pushing in that recruitment. You've heard Caleb Cunningham, the five-star wide receiver, floated as well. I mentioned to our subscribers, I never really bought that much at all. Oklahoma at least took its shot prior to the dead period, getting him on campus. The visit went well, but right now I'm not necessarily expecting Caleb Cunningham to get back onto campus. You never know, though, right? This world of college football recruiting specifically, so much can change in the blink of an eye. But some more maybe sensible names as well. A guy I really like, and he was at this event that we're going to get to talk about here in a second, Emmanuel Choice out of Lancaster. I mean, big, tall, 6'4" true wide receiver, probably hovering around 200 pounds now. Just a really good looking player. And at a place like Lancaster, Emmanuel Choice, he lives in the area in the greater DFW Metroplex that Emmett Jones has a lot of influence in. Emmanuel Choice has told me time and again that he really respects Emmett Jones because he's from the area he lives in, coached in the area as a high school coach. And I've got more from Emmanuel himself coming to SoonersIllustrated.com in an interview we did at Under Armour Dallas. And then I think the guy that I'm fascinated by potentially the most as it relates to this spot, and there are a few others, but this is the last name I want to mention because I'm going to have a lot more VIP content on this topic for our subscribers. Andrew Marsh. He's high 4-star wide receiver.
Yeah.
Born in the Houston area. Went to go see him during the season last year, and I was thoroughly impressed. Not only is he a highly ranked talent, but he's a great kid. And everything I've been told, he and Emmett Jones have a very strong relationship. It was just a matter of, is Andrew Marsh willing to entertain destinations beyond his part of town? And it sounds like, for the most part, that's something to monitor. And I know that at one point or another, everyone from Michigan and Penn State to Kentucky has been involved with Andrew Marsh. And now I think a recruitment that's for a very long time kind of been perceived as A&M's to lose, maybe. Oklahoma might be trying to punch it out a little bit more for Andrew Marsh, and I'll be getting to talk to him at another event that we're going to talk about during this podcast. So awesome names to know, but at the end of the day, for both Jaden Nickens and Oklahoma, really not a shocker, and I think that could potentially work out for the best on both fronts.
For sure, Marsh, one of the guys that stood out big time last year at the Brent Venables camps in the summer too, going all the way back to then. So he's been on the radar for a while. But as far as Nickens, yeah, I mean, it's tough to play football and basketball, like you said, at this level. It makes me think of Jacoby Johnson, who, out of high school there at Mustang, had offers from Porter Moser in the basketball program, and obviously with the football program as well. The basketball season has come and gone. Did we see Jacoby Johnson out there in uniform at the LNC? It didn't happen. He ended up not doing it because it's borderline. I don't want to say impossible because it can be done, but it's tough. It's a lot harder than, like you said, trying to do football and baseball. So wish him the best. It's going to take a very accommodating coaching staff on both sides at another university to make that happen. So we'll see. Maybe he can pull it off. Obviously, again, kind of wrap that up with your point there on the other guys are chasing. Not to diminish Jaden Nickens as a player, because I've had the pleasure of seeing him in person. He's a freak. He's going to be really good at the next level. He's a very talented guy. But if there's a single position that you could feel okay about losing somebody, it would probably be wide receiver with the way that Emmett Jones has recruited that spot the last couple of cycles. And like you said, with those names he's got his eye on. So not something you want to have happen, but, Oklahoma can probably stomach it and, absorb the blow and move forward from it.
Sure.
Piggybacking right off that, like you say all the time, never stops. Recruiting is 24/7, 365. Future Freaks weekend over the weekend in Norman. A lot of guys descended upon the stadium and the facilities. Big visit weekend. Guys from multiple classes were in town. Let's break it up into skill guys and big guys. I'll start with skill guys, coming right off of Nickens and some of the names you mentioned there. What were some of the feedback that you've got that you heard back from on terms of the skill positions coming out of the weekend there in Norman, as a lot of guys made their way to town for a visit?
Yeah, another wide receiver name to know going off of Nickens. So I appreciate the smooth transition there. That's why you're my boss. Quincy Porter is a name to know as well. I mentioned a lot of those guys kind of in this region. Quincy Porter isn't from around these parts, but it sounds like there's very serious interest between Oklahoma and Quincy Porter. And if I remember correctly, he's someone who stands, I believe, at around 6'4", really talented track runner as well. He lives out in the state of New Jersey. We have him as the number 114 overall player in the country for 2025. So bottom line here, really good football player, top 10 wide receiver for 24/7 Sports, top 3 player in the state of New Jersey. It looks like in the composite, the consensus kind of algorithm puts him as the number one player in that state. He just visited. I like the build. I like the tape as well. So you are encouraged by the fact that he's 6'3", 6'4", 190. He's running track, and it all translates to the football field. And so I think for Quincy Porter, it's a pretty big deal to get a guy like that on campus. And then another thing I'll mention real quick, 2025, I think the other thing you got to understand is a method of madness, if you will, that Oklahoma has embraced is that PWO through NIL front.
Yep.
And there are wide receivers who make some sense for that type of role. And I think what's fascinating to me is how exactly Oklahoma plans to utilize those PWO NIL spaces. There aren't always a ton, but I do want to mention as well that Oklahoma could look to maybe bring in a talented wide receiver similar to a Jacob Jordan, if you'll remember correctly, out of South Lake Carroll. And Jacob Jordan is already generating a ton of buzz through winter workouts and in a spring ball. It sounds like Oklahoma's very thrilled with his progress and overall effort as a wide receiver through the PWO NIL route. But other skill guys I want to mention real quick. Let's go to the defensive side on the skill front. Malik Hawkins made it for the weekend. Yep. Kind of a late add to the visit weekend, too. The initial list I was able to gather, he wasn't on there. And then he ended up scheduling it out. Another trip that went really well. Continue to keep my eyes on him. And then the other name I want to mention is Amarian Robinson, the safety target out of the state of Arkansas. He's fascinating, man. He tweeted a couple pictures out from the visit, if I remember correctly. Sounds like everyone in his camp that was around him for the visit all thrilled with the visit there. I continue to say, man, besides a guy like Jonah Williams, Amarian Robinson to me is maybe the safety that Oklahoma continues to eye down. And there's another name who I'm going to talk about here in a second at that position that OU really wants as well. But Amarian Robinson made it into Future Freaks. And it just sounds like, as we talk about the 2025 class, the class everyone wants to know about, a couple of names there. But Future Freaks wasn't a visit weekend that was tailored towards 2025. Future Freaks largely entailed 2026s, 2027s, and even a 2028 or two. Who made it to campus? Jonathan Hatton Jr. Yeah, it's crazy. I think I told a couple people when I was out at Under Armour Dallas, we were talking about how fast recruiting goes. And I said, yeah, the other day I did type the name of an 8th grader, soon to be a freshman, into a visitor list. I wanted to quit my job. But there are guys that make me love my job, and chief among them is Jonathan Hatton Jr., OU's 2026 running back commit. He was there. He kind of served as the Kevin Sperry of the weekend, as one of, if not the lone OU commit in attendance. Jonathan Hatton Jr. remains one of my favorite running backs potentially that I've ever covered. I just think the world of that kid. And this ended up being a really stacked visitor list on a number of different fronts. I'm just kind of going through the list here. Yaheem Riley is a defensive back here in the state of Texas that I know Oklahoma likes a lot. Outside him, Javian Osborne is a running back that they really like. And this is something I'm probably going to write about. The 2026 running back list for Oklahoma, fascinating to me. I don't know how they're going to handle it, because you've got Javian Osborne, Caden Jones, who I believe made it to the weekend. He visited OU for Future Freaks. Then you've got Rylan Morris, who is another one that's very interested in Oklahoma. He was at Under Armour Dallas and visited for Future Freaks. And Rylan Morris even told me, like, I got to hang out with Jonathan Hatton Jr. I thought that was a lot of fun. And so there's a number of other really talented players. Deshaun Rideau, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that one, but highly ranked running back, I believe from Louisiana, was a late addition that came up on my radar. Just another name to consider. But yeah, it just goes to show you how many running backs in 2026 alone that are on the short list. for Oklahoma. Other guys that I really like a lot, Zachary Turner out of Duncanville, flex, tight end wide receiver who plays for the Panthers, helped win him a state championship last year. Fascinating player. I stumbled upon him at a camp that I did with Coach Flight, D-Rob, Mike West, some recruiting and training guys here in the state of Texas that I've long associated with. And Zach Turner showed up. He didn't really have a ton of offers. Cooked everyone at this camp. I'm like, where are you from? And he was like, I'm from Duncanville. And I was like, oh, that checks out.
Yeah, there you go.
Mason James, Norman North,
Yep.
wide receiver. He visited this weekend, told me it was great. Went out of his way to find me and tell me, like, hey, man, I enjoyed the OU visit. And I think that's a big deal. And so I could go on and on. But as far as skill guys, those are a few names to know. And then the big guys where we'll get into is it's a fascinating crop of prospects that went through on Future Freaks. I'll go ahead and jump in here real quick. Just knock out a few names. Kevin Ford Jr. is who I want to start with. This is the number one player in the state of Texas for 2026. And he's from Duncanville. Funny how that works out.
Yeah.
They lose Collin Simmons. Yeah. They lose Collin Simmons, and they have Kevin Ford Jr. waiting in the wings. By the way, it was insane being in the state championship this past year, and I'm watching Collin Simmons on one end and Kevin Ford Jr. on the other, and I'm like, what do you do? You know, objectively, what do you do if you're the offensive coordinator, calling against literally two of the highest-ranked defensive end players, not just in Texas, in America? Kevin Ford Jr. not only made it a Future Freaks, Josh, he's visiting Oklahoma today as we record this podcast. So it's 2 visits by my count over the past couple of days. Really interested in that one.
Yeah, and they are practicing today too, so I imagine he'll be out there.
Him and Javian Osborne are on campus right now. The running back from North Forney. So both of those guys have visited now within the past couple of days, and they'll probably check out a spring practice, have further meetings with the staff. I think that's worth noting. Kevin Ford Jr. to me is someone, he fascinates me because he's always been kind of seen as someone who's going to go to Texas. I mean, he played games last year for Duncanville where he had the Texas gloves, the Texas arm sleeve. I can't remember if he had the Texas leg sleeves on, but maybe some socks. It was like, oh, okay. Yeah. But now he's, I believe in the span of about 5 days, and my math could be really bad here, 5 to 7 days, let's call it. He's gotten his Oklahoma offer and visited campus twice. I'm not saying that changes anything, but I just find that very interesting. Serious effort for Kevin Ford Jr., again, an elite player in the state of Texas, to get on campus. Few other guys that were really talented players. I will start with Drew Evers, obviously the younger brother of Nick Evers. Yeah. Familiar face, familiar name. He was on campus. Sounds like everything went really well. Bill Beanbo continuing to target this guy. The other offensive tackle in 2026, John Turntine, who I love. North Crowley kid. I'll talk about him a little bit more when we get to Under Armour Dallas stuff, but this was a big one. I actually talked to some sources at North Crowley and actually had someone text me and be like, hey, just want to let you know John Turntine's going to end up making it. Was potentially a late ad. Come to find out, his visit to OU this past weekend wasn't necessarily a foregone conclusion. Oklahoma getting him there was big. Taj Overton, in-state defensive lineman, was on the visit list. Luke Waffle, highly ranked defensive end. He was on the visit list. Few other names here and there I could dive into. Brett Colajay, IMG Academy, offensive lineman.
Yeah.
Felix Ojo, offensive tackle from Mansfield area, Lake Ridge High School. Got a text from a source on the Oklahoma side saying, hey, as long as he looks good, we're going to offer him this weekend. That's what they exactly did. So many others. Zayden Krempen, Prosper offensive tackle. Bryce Gilmore, Prosper offensive tackle. 2 2026 offensive tackles I love. Have known both of those kids now for a little bit. Really cool to see them get out there. And then I'll close with this because we did SEAL guys, we did offensive linemen. As far as quarterbacks, you did have Adrian Peterson's younger brother.
Saw that.
Nelson Peterson on campus.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, how the time flies, right? But Nelson Peterson made it to campus as far as the quarterbacks. A few other names to know, but did want to throw that one out there. The 2027 class, though, to close in on the big guys, really cool to see some 2027s on campus who I personally like a lot make the trip to OU. Zane Rowe, Denton Geyer has a chance to be one of the top 32 players when it's all said and done in 2027. It's just elite across the board. He was at Oklahoma with Kyron Haywood, defensive tackle at Denton Geyer, his teammate as well. Dwayne Jones is a player, young guy at Owasso. How about those Owasso Rams, man? They got a lot of talent coming up. Dwayne Jones, 2027 kid in state at Owasso. Everyone knows Taj Overton on that defensive line at Owasso, but Dwayne Jones, you cut on the tape, a kid who's a freshman right now. We may be going to Owasso sometime soon to see all these kids they got on the defensive and offensive line.
Sure.
Peyton Miller, offensive lineman, freshman at Anna. Anna won the state championship in Texas. Player who's been on my radar for a little bit. Another guy that Oklahoma source texted me and said, hey, as long as he checks out, he's going to get an offer from us this weekend. Exactly what happened. Glad that OU entered the mix there for Peyton Miller. And then the last guy I want to mention is Jordan Caraway. I have known Jordan Caraway, I believe, since he was in like the 6th grade. And it is crazy. Again, I just can't emphasize it. Like, this recruiting space is really strange because I met Jordan Caraway, I believe, when he had like just graduated middle school. And it's to see him now as a 2027 prospect visiting places like Oklahoma is insane. So just, again, not only a testament to the way this recruiting stuff goes, but Jordan Caraway has been training hard since he was literally in middle school. I can vouch for him on that front, and Oklahoma got him on campus. So long-winded way of saying there were a lot of guys on campus and a successful visit weekend for future freaks.
For sure. Obviously, one of the, I don't know, is it one of the first really big weekends in the post, J.R. Sandlin era after, he moved on to SMU game, which we talked about a few weeks back. And obviously Jolie Alley doing her thing in there. So good to hear that, things are still running smoothly. The program didn't shutter after losing a couple people. And, that 24 class, which is really loaded up in the trenches on both offensive line and defensive line, kind of building off of that. I'm sure that gets a lot of fans excited. I got to ask you real quick before we kind of wrap that up. The 2028. What are the names? Because 2028, that's not in high school yet. Or is it? It's about to be a freshman?
About to be a freshman.
That's insane.
Let me make sure I get this right real quick. So it is a running back.
It is insane. How good you got to be to get OU wanting you on campus when you're not even in high school yet?
So basically, I'll tell the story while I pull up his profile. I'm checking over. Man, I can't believe I'm saying this stuff. I'm checking over the visitor list that I'm assembling. Obviously, I'm checking up with sources like, hey, just want to verify this kid's expected on campus, so on and so forth. Yeah. And then I'm told, like, hey, we're going to have this 2028 kid on campus, by the way. And I'm like, did you misspell that? Like, I know the 2027s are coming. And I'm like, no, 2028. So this kid's name is Sydney Hubbard. You can find him on Twitter at SidHub_baller.
Great.
And I guess he's a baller, man, because you pull up the profile and it says 5'11", 180, 120 yards rushing per game, 11 touchdowns, 3-sport athlete, football, basketball, and track. Again, keep in mind, this is all in the Twitter bio of a middle schooler. So,
Unreal.
We don't have verified height and weight for him, but he lives in Forney, Texas. Typically, there are dudes out in Forney. So, and look, if Oklahoma got him on campus, I'm not taking anything away from this kid, obviously. It's just mind-numbing to me that I had to write in the name of a 8th grader. But hey, I mean, look, you pull it up, and he's got a picture right next to DeMarco Murray on his timeline. So crazy time.
Basically, remember the name in like 4 years. If he signs, we can circle back to this show in March of 2024 and be like, remember, we brought him up, Sidney Hubbard.
When Sidney Hubbard's got Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, Texas A&M on the table. And let's say he puts on the OU hat, you can say, man, remember when those idiots at Sooners Illustrated were talking about this kid when he was in middle school?
Unbelievable.
It's like, hey, don't say we didn't tell you.
It won't be long until we're going to see a 2030 kid pop up, and that's going to really be eye-opening. Get a nice 2030.
Funny quick story before we transition. The same camp where I stumbled into Zach Turner, and I gave him a top performers band to make him go into one-on-ones against all like the top kids. I had a 6th grader non-jokingly come up to me and be like, hey, man, why didn't I get a top performers band? And I'm like, I'm not putting you against seniors in high school in one-on-one scenarios, kid. I don't know where your father is, but you need to go find them. So we're getting closer than we want to admit to a 2030 kid being like, I'm on the scene, man. You know what I mean?
Unbelievable. Well, great to hear. Good weekend for Oklahoma, obviously. And, like you said, some visits. I've seen some visits kind of get announced and posted, and that'll be happening a lot over the course of spring practice, after the spring game, which we'll talk about more and more as that gets closer, a little over a month from now. Team heads to spring break next week, and then they'll get back to it with the rest of spring camp the week following. Before we get to hoop stuff, I do want to talk about the Under Armour regionals that are going on currently. The one in Dallas just happened this past Sunday. Some of those Future Freaks guys were there. What were some of the standouts that you saw down there in your neck of the woods in DFW, and just, I guess, some more news and notes that you took out of that weekend there at the Under Armour Regional?
Yeah, I'll start with a quick story because I know fans like to go beyond the whole, this guy looks good, whatever.
Sure.
I'm walking around Under Armour Dallas, and you'll enjoy this. I hear someone shout my name, Collin Kennedy. And it got to the point where I was startled. Like, I had to do one of those numbers.
Yeah.
And I'm looking around, and this guy sticks his hand up, probably 30, 40 yards away from me behind the parents and observers line. And I'm looking from afar. I only wear one contact in my eye. Don't talk about it. But I'm looking, and I'm like, I can't really make out who that is. So I walk over there, and I see a logo on the shirt that I didn't really recognize in that moment. I go up, I shake this guy's hand. I'm like, hey, man, yeah, I'm Collin Kennedy. He goes, hey, I'm Tommy Wimberly. I'm Marcus Wimberly's dad, the 3-star safety out of Arkansas.
From and he goes, Bauxite? Is that your pronounce?
Yeah, Bauxite. So he goes, yeah, I watch y'all's podcast every week. So
heck yeah, there we go. We'll shout
Tommy Wimberly. This is a shout to you, my friend. Appreciate you watching. But that's where I want to start. Marcus Wimberly had himself a day.
Yeah.
Went down, I believe, during one-on-ones, and really didn't affect him at all. I looked at some of the final testing results from him, and I think that this kid did himself some favors.
Mm-hmm.
Consistently tested inside the top 8 to 10, if not top 2 in certain metrics. Then went out, looked good in field position-specific drills on the field. Had some good reps at one-on-one before I think someone stepped on his ankle. So it was nothing of his own doing.
Right.
Marcus Wimberly obviously has a number of Oklahoma crystal balls in. I've held back. I think this is a kid who is going to further explore the process, rightfully so. I know Oklahoma wants him, but I also know, I believe Oregon offered him late last night. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's a lot to do with what he did at Under Armour Dallas event that we're talking about. So Marcus Wimberly, was really impressed with him. I'll kind of go from there. a big reason why you're not really fretting a ton about losing Jaden Nickens is not just because you have Emmett Jones as the receivers coach or the way you've recruited the position, but in state at the same position, Elijah Thomas is making the case to be the best player in Oklahoma.
Oh, yeah.
One wide receiver MVP. And keep in mind, this is out of players from the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. There's a lot of talent in the building, and Elijah Thomas wins wide receiver MVP. Got to chop it up with him afterwards. I don't think it's much of a secret. I've always felt like this kid is just dynamic. He looks good from a build perspective. He looks good from a movement perspective. Natural soft hands, smooth but twitchy. It's hard to describe Elijah Thomas and give him his full due.
Right.
But I'm a huge fan of his, and he showed again why he's one of the best players in this region.
Another guy last year at camps in the summer, working with Hawkins and Sperry, just cooking everybody.
Man, he's stellar, and I'm a big fan of Elijah Thomas. So many others that I could get into, but I'll transition quickly into the offensive line because I know a lot of people want to talk about that. Ty Haywood looked really good. Again, I believe. I mean, I don't know what else to say about Ty Haywood. We made him top 25 in the country for a reason.
Right.
I have a great relationship with Ty, and I've kind of known about his background and story. Just the kid deserves it. Had a stellar day. Michael Fasusi had a really good day as well. Lamont Rogers had a really good day as well. So the big three in Dallas, as we call them, because they all live in DFW, they're highly ranked offensive tackles. And by the way, they're all really big. The big three showed out. But I wanted to talk real quick about John Turntine. I mentioned him during the Future Freaks stuff. John Turntine in North Crowley, to me, is now a player that we're talking about. Not like, does he get into the top 247, 200, 150, 100? It's a matter of like, where is this kid going to end up? Because I don't know that there's now much of a debate that John Turntine's probably one of the top 3 to 5 players in the state of Texas for 2026. And you could convince me he's much higher. I think this kid's really talented. Oklahoma getting him on campus was a big deal. Again, not necessarily a foregone conclusion he was going to arrive. This is already a recruitment that is in the spotlight. And I've literally had college sources rave about John Turntine to me behind the scenes. That like everyone in college football already has fallen in love with John Turntine. And I think the casual fan really needs to start monitoring this kid because he's going to be someone we have to talk about basically on every single other podcast.
Right. Phenomenal name, too. Just a fun name.
As an offensive tackle, too, I believe he's John Turntine the third, too.
I pulled up his profile to make sure I had it right. Yeah, the third. John
Turntine the third.
Love it.
Man, and
that's a star.
That's a future freak if I've ever seen one. Anyway, man, I'm a big fan of John Turntine. A lot of talent out there. We've gone over some of the allotted time here, but basically a couple of names to shout out as far as Under Armour Dallas and just a stellar camp. The guys out there do a great job and looking forward to another one coming up this weekend.
Yeah, no, before we started recording, we were kind of talking about getting the rundown of the show. And, we said we'll finish up before we get to hoops. We'll do preview Under Armour Houston a little bit. And you said one of the most stacked rosters basically that you had seen for one of these things. So obviously we'll be able to break it down and recap it next week. But as far as looking into this weekend, as you make your way down to Houston from DFW, what are some names you're keeping an eye on? It sounds like, from what you've told me, that it's going to be quite the who's who here of guys that are going to be down there in H-Town, as they say.
Yeah, you tell me at home if you've heard these names before. 5-star safety Jonah Williams,
Yes.
4-star cornerback Kobe Sellers,
Yes.
4-star defensive lineman Landon Rank, 4-star running back Torrey Blaylock, 4-star wide receiver Andrew Marsh.
Crazy.
I can keep going. I'm going to stop there. But, I mean, we're going to have, 5-star wide receiver Khalik Lockett is randomly pulling up. He's a DFW kid. I don't know why he's driving from Saxe all the way down to Houston to participate in this thing. Maybe he just wanted to line it up with Jonah Williams. I don't know. I'm not going to complain about it either. Long story short, there's a ton of OU targets that are planning or expecting to be at this thing. I don't have time to run through them all, but I'm planning on going to a couple of events actually before this event, just so that I can knock out a couple of interviews so I don't have to do them the same day as all these other kids getting to campus.
Yeah,
exactly. So now I think what I want to kind of tie the bow on here is I threw out a couple of names. They're obviously high profile players, all to do with Oklahoma alone. I didn't even dive into all the other highly ranked players that are expected to be there. I mean, I'm looking at the list, and right now I see 25 names in the top 247 alone. It's crazy. What is Under Armour, the UC report? Why do we go? Why is it so important? Why does 24/7 attend all these events, and why is the UC Under Armour doing this? This is a setting where we get to watch these highly ranked kids. They are forced to verify their height, weight, 40 time, 3-cone, 10-yard, broad jump, vertical jump. They go through a combine setting in testing.
Right.
We get all that data. 24/7 subscribes to the UC report. I believe the old line was 133 out of 134 FBS teams subscribed to the UC report at one time.
Who's the one? Who's the one?
I can't remember exactly what it was, or maybe it was 63 out of 64 Power Fives subscribe.
Right.
Now we're in the P4 era, so I don't know what that saying looks like now, but we get to see these guys go through combine testing, and then we get to see them go through position-specific drills. We get to watch them, compare them, and then they all converge on a one field, and every position group must go through one-on-ones besides the quarterbacks, obviously. But the quarterbacks are the ones throwing to all these players during the one-on-ones. So we're seeing the quarterbacks even having to throw in a competitive setting, and the moral of the story is best on best verified. And that's why these camps are so important. And that's why when I look at this camp list, it's man, I'm not going to be able to look down at my phone because there's going to be something going on that I'm going to want to see. You know what I mean? So really excited about this stretch. I've obviously now been to Under Armour Atlanta, Under Armour Dallas. Under Armour Houston this weekend has a chance to be one of, if not the best. And I think a lot of great coverage is going to come out of it.
It sounds like a phenomenal time to become a VIP subscriber. Spring ball deal, 50% off, right?
Mm-hmm.
50% off VIP subscriptions right now. Special deal for spring ball. We also have spring camp just kicking up for the current team. So a lot happening. Great time to jump aboard, become a VIP member of the Sooners Illustrated, and get all the VIP intel. Collin's been all over it, and will continue to be, obviously, as he always is. And we also get our national guys. We've been getting a lot of input from the national guys. Tom Loy, shout out, has been very good to OU fans as of late on our board. So shout out to him, and you get access to the full 24/7 Sports Network, all that good stuff. So become a VIP subscriber. Great time. 50% off right now, spring ball special. So it doesn't, the no-brainer. This is the time to strike. It'll be the new season before you know it as well. So this is the time to strike. All right. Good stuff with CK there on the recruiting side. We'll be back obviously next week, and we'll recap that trip for Collin to Houston and everything else that's going on. Before we finish up the show, do want to bring up hoops a little bit. Obviously, knocked out of the Big 12 tournament yesterday. They went one and done, losing to TCU. They put up a good fight relatively. They were missing Rivaldo Soares, John Hughley, and Javen McCullum. That's three guys you knew going in it was going to be a tall task to try and beat a good TCU team without those three guys. And they, like I said, they battled, they put up a fight, but they just didn't have the firepower, quite simply, especially on the bench without those key pieces. I asked Porter on whatever that was, Tuesday, directly. I asked him if there was any consideration of just resting these guys, kind of playing it safe, I guess, because Oklahoma does feel like they're in good standing for the tournament. He kind of didn't really want to admit that they were doing that, but I do believe that OU played it safe here, especially I think like Soares and McCollum probably, if they really season on the line, could have pushed it and played. But there's just no reason to push it. Oklahoma's in good standing to make the tournament. I know some people have got a little worried, and I wouldn't say it's 100%, but I'm feeling 90+% confident that Oklahoma's going to be okay on Selection Sunday. They won 20 games. They won 8 Big 12 games. They have no losses outside of Quad 1. They're a tournament team. So I feel very confident that Oklahoma will be a tournament team when the bracket comes out on Sunday. CK, I guess we're looking forward to March Madness now. And I still think, this team's had its ups and downs. But as Porter Moser noted yesterday in the post-game press conference there in Kansas City, when they're at full strength this year, Oklahoma's 18-6. They haven't been at full strength in a long time. They've been missing John Hughley for several weeks now. Obviously, Soares has been kind of in and out. Jaden McCollum's missed a couple of games. But all those guys are expected to be back and ready for the tournament next week. So, I know OU fans have had kind of a love-hate relationship with this team and with Porter this year. I think this team has got an ability. We saw what they did against Houston, last weekend. They got an ability to maybe make some things happen in the tournament at full strength, which they should be next week. So we're just kind of looking forward to that now. Hopefully they get everybody, and it's March Madness, man. Who knows? It's the craziest tournament that there is. Porter Moser's gone on a couple of these runs himself in the past over at his previous stop. So we'll see what happens next week in the tournament. But I do believe Oklahoma's going to be in pretty good shape to get in on Selection Sunday.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time tracking down exactly kind of the projected landing spots for OU basketball in bracketology or what have you. I know guys like Jerry Palm, Matt Norlander for us at CBS Sports are all over it these days. I haven't yet pulled up Jerry Palm's most recent bracket, but he's usually a very reliable source.
Yeah, Tom just put out, while we're recording here, he put out kind of an updated bracketology, which is a great thing that Tom does. He kind of goes through all the national guys and kind of compiles them together for you. We kind of went through it. Joel Lenard with ESPN's got OU in as a 10 seed. Jerry Palm's got him in as a 9 seed. You kind of look around. T-Rank's got him in as a 9 seed. So in T-Rank, by the way, which is a great metric, 98.5% chance to make the tournament, according to T-Rank. That really is just basically barring a crazy amount of bid stealers. OU should be in the field. So I know there's been a little bit of talk, and if you watched that game yesterday, the broadcast was kind of very doom and gloom on how important the game was. I just don't think that's the case. I think Oklahoma's going to be fine. They're going to be in the tournament. And in some ways, you could make the argument, and I wouldn't really push back on it. I might even agree that having a 10 seed as opposed to an 8 or 9 is probably better. The difference between playing a 7 and an 8 is marginal, and I feel the difference between playing a 1 and a 2 is bit larger looking ahead to the second round. I mean, would you rather play, potentially a Marquette, or would you rather play potentially a UConn or a Purdue? You know what I mean? That's kind of a big difference. Not to say Marquette's not very good. They are. But there's a bit of a gap there between that very top echelon team, UConn, Purdue, that they would potentially have to play as opposed to where those 2 seeds are. So we'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do next week. Get the Selection Sunday on Sunday afternoon and find out where they're headed and when they play. I believe the plan is for Tom to get out there wherever they go. I think I'm going to hold back on this first weekend. If they get to the next weekend, I'll reconvene. But it's going to be fun. It's the postseason. It's a great time of year. March Madness is the best, and we look forward to it. Hopefully Oklahoma can get in there first time under Porter Moser if they get the nod on Sunday, which I anticipate they will. So
yeah, I've seen them with projected opponents everywhere from Gonzaga to Clemson to whoever else. But it wouldn't be ideal facing someone like Gonzaga in the first round.
Gonzaga's a bit underseeded, I think. They're pretty good.
But it looks like for the most part, there's kind of a consensus going around. If Oklahoma's not in the East region, which I believe is out in Charlotte, North Carolina, the South might be where they end up. So one of those two. But I do see some Gonzagas kind of as like a 7 to 8 seed that OU might match up with. And if that's the case, that'd be a heck of a matchup out of the gate for Oklahoma. And you're truly putting guys like Hughley to the test against a team like Gonzaga that we know traditionally is pretty solid in the front court. I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, we talk about it a lot on this podcast. I relate to a lot of the casual OU basketball fans and a lot of people who are tuning in. And I think the casual fan is probably sitting there saying, okay, well, what is a successful tournament appearance for Oklahoma? I mean, I think none of us are expecting them to win the national championship this year, especially when some of the teams, like you mentioned, are out there, UConn and the sorts. But this is a team to me that in the times that I have watched them at full strength, I can't rule out a first-round victory, right? And then from there, you're kind of playing with house money, especially when we know that Porter Moser's at least base system and principles works in this tournament, right? So I don't know exactly what a successful tournament would be for OU, but if you, let's say, end up with a first-round matchup with Gonzaga, like you could potentially win that game and then go from there and just kind of see what the world has for you.
For sure. No, I think a successful tournament for Oklahoma is being in it. Frankly, this year, after being in a little bit of a drought, getting back to the tournament was kind of always the goal, and then you see where you go from there. So it's been a good year, and I will acknowledge it real quick here at the very tail end of the show. We didn't talk about it on Monday. We thought about it, Tom and I, but we decided not to. But I wouldn't bring it up now since Porter talked about it himself on Tuesday. The DePaul rumors kicked up again. It became a thing again. We talked about this a month ago, and Porter had an opportunity to talk about it then, and he shot it down directly. I gave my 2 cents back then. That makes no sense. DePaul is a horrible job. They won 3 games this year. That's a massive rebuild that you have to undergo there. Other than it just being in Chicago, which is obviously Porter's hometown, there was just not really any reason to take that job. The rumors kicked up again this week. Porter Moser again vehemently denied it, and he's not going anywhere. It sounds like they're actually going to hire Chris Holtman from Ohio State. That kind of came down this morning. So he's not going anywhere. He shot it down. Porter Moser is hanging around. He's not leaving. It's going to be a yearly thing, I guess, that there's some job he's connected to, and he has to deny it. But he's not going anywhere. And this year for Oklahoma, some fans have had kind of like I said, a bit of a hot and cold on this season. They're on 20 games for the first time since 2016. And they're going back to the tournament. I know it's been ugly at times. It has been. There's been some ugly games. They turned it over about 1,000 times yesterday in that loss to TCU. But they're on 20 games this year. They're probably going back to the tournament. It's moving the right direction. They're still recruiting pretty well. I think there's reason to think that in the SEC, which is a very good basketball conference, but not quite as deep as the Big 12, that they're going to be perennially in the mix of the tournament pretty much every year moving forward. I think that's fair to say. So, Porter, I think, there's been some areas where Porter hasn't, I think fairly has gotten dinged and fans have been upset, but I also think that it's moving the right direction and they're going to get back to the tournament, it looks like. So, kind of have that, a little bit of that grace there, that nuance to kind of what's happening a little bit. So, solid year, and we'll see what happens on Selection Sunday, and we'll see what happens, obviously, from there in the tournament next week. Monday show, James and Tom will join me. Obviously, we will break that down. Selection Sunday will react to whatever happens to Oklahoma, whether they're in the field, they're not in the field, who they're playing, what their path is, all that stuff. We'll break it all down. We'll also recap anything that we get out of spring camp the first week, wrapping up today, their third practice today. We'll also do a little last stash report series, wrap that up, and all the other stuff that happens between now and then with OU football and basketball, all that good stuff. CK, safe travels to Houston. I'm going down to you. I think I'm going down for TCU baseball series with Oklahoma this weekend. You're going to Houston, so we're both going to be – we're just taking where we usually are, 3-4 hours apart, and just shifting it.
Sure.
So safe travels for you, and we'll catch up with you next week. We'll recap it.
Can't wait for it. I'm excited to hear more about OU baseball next time, too.
Playing good?
Love this OU TCU series, man. It's always a good time. And as we kind of get into March Madness, that also signifies to me that Diamond Sports at Oklahoma are stepping in the spotlight. And we know on both fronts they're pretty darn good for it. So looking forward to it. And then I'm hoping to have some really fun nuggets for next Thursday's show because, again, this camp is as stacked as I've ever seen.
100%. Skip Spoilers have won 5 of 6. Tough Bedlam loss the other night, but 5 of 6. 3-0 start to Big 12 play. So far, so good. Team's got some things to like. All right, that's it. We'll be back Monday with Tom and James. Collin will be back next Thursday. That's it for now. For Collin Kenny, I'm Josh Callaway. We'll see you guys next time right back here on the Sooners Illustrated podcast.